I'm David Willner.
I'm Barnea Levi Selavan. And Taped with Rabbi Doug is next.
We're gonna see Rabbi Doug. We're gonna see Rabbi Doug. We're gonna see Rabbi Doug on your TV tonight.
But Daddy, I want to watch Monday Night Football.
Forget about Monday Night Football. There's no other thing we're gonna watch on Monday but Rabbi Doug. Yeah, Rabbi Doug on TV tonight. We're gonna see Rabbi Doug. Oh, everybody talk about Doug.
Shalom and welcome to Taped with Rabbi Doug. We are here in Chicago, Illinois, and today we are going to see one of the most interesting programs I have ever attended. And I'm here with Rabbi Heschel Weiner. He is the director of the Walder Science Pavilion, the Walder Science Center.
Well, the name is the Martin and Gertrude Walder Science Laboratory and Learning Center.
Very good. The official name.
I'm the director.
In the Wi-Fi building in Skokie, Illinois.
Right, 8180 McCormick.
And this program today, we have Rabbi Barnea Selavan.
Correct.
And Rabbi David Willner.
Right.
And the two of them, David Willner and Rabbi Selavan, are archaeologists and experts on Tanach and antiquities in Israel, besides connecting the places in Israel to the locations of events that took place in the Bible, in the Tanakh. Can you tell me how you came across them and how they were brought to Chicago originally?
Well, one of the programs of the Walder Science Center is the Jerusalem Science Contest. The Walder Science Center promotes programs that interface science with Judaism. And we have a nationwide contest for juniors and seniors in high schools in which the students every year learn a particular discipline of science and the Jewish interface. And those who win the top scores are given a trip to Israel. On our trip, we've met Rabbi Selavan. He is our Mora Derech, our tour guide, and has taken us through the old city of Jerusalem and to archaeological sites. And it was during one of these trips that Rabbi Selavan said to me, you know, Heschel, it's not just archaeology. We need to come to the schools outside of Israel and start working with teachers how to better enrich their Torah studies with their kids, to bring it alive, to make it more tactile, to make it more experiential, so that the retention time of the students' learning will extend. A lot of money is invested in Jewish education, and just like you don't want to buy a product that destructs in a few short weeks, you want a product that has longevity. Similarly, when you invest in Jewish education, you want the children to be able to take away learning which will stay with them with years.
And hands-on learning and visual learning of the real thing like this is one of those things.
So Rabbi Selavan and Mr. Willner have developed the whole program using maps, geography, topography, history, archaeology, that together, if teachers can be trained to deliver their students the same information of places and the life and times of the Torah in a real experiential way, then that will become more. It will have a greater longevity of retention.
The Bible, the Tanakh, comes alive. In other
That's
words,
correct. They live it. For example, every child knows the streets in the neighborhood where he lives. So if you say something, if you're an outsider coming into the neighborhood and you make a statement about the neighborhood, which, I'm going to meet you at the intersection of two streets which are actually parallel, the kid will laugh because they'll know you don't understand my neighborhood. Well, Barnea and David want that Eretz Yisrael becomes every Jewish child's neighborhood, so that when the children learn about things that happen in Israel, they go, that's taking place in my neighborhood. Eretz Yisrael is my neighborhood, and I understand it.
It's wonderful. It's wonderful. So, I want to congratulate you. I know we have a lot of, this is a not-for-profit organization. It is a wonderful thing, and a lot of not-for-profit sponsors have also come forward to help bring them to Chicago to educate the children. Who are those people? Because I want to mention them.
Well, our sponsors, and they do deserve special recognition. One is Dr. Joseph Walder, who is the chairman of the Walder Foundation for Learning and Development. Rabbi Sidney Glenner, who's the chairman of the Rabbi Sidney Glenner Foundation, Mr. Robert Hartman of the Hartman Family Foundation, and Dr. Yigal Yahav. And those four gentlemen...
well, most of them have, I think, all of them have been on my TV show at one time or another,
well,
so that's great.
They are very
Philanthropists
strong
and
supporters of Jewish education and Jewish institutions in the city and outside.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, we are going to meet Barnea and David and hear their presentation. We are going to see some antiquities which are just unbelievable. Stay with us here on Tape with Rabbi Doug. Thank you, Rabbi Weiner, and come and meet David and meet Barnea.
We're going to share with you today two places in Eretz Yisrael. The first place that we're going to share with you is important for what it represents. The second place that we're going to share with you is important for what it is. Which doesn't mean that each one doesn't share aspects of the other. They're from two completely different kufos, from two different periods in time, but they demonstrate very clearly the power of Eretz Yisrael and the power of places in Israel and their ability to communicate messages. The first place that I'm going to share with you is a town called Yavne. When we first came to Yavne, which is about 13 years ago, it was completely overrun with weeds, with garbage. It was in a terrible state of neglect. It's at the southern entrance to the modern town of Yavne today. There isn't a hotel room to be had in town. And we were shocked by what we found. We found a city that is so central to the development of Bnei Yisrael after the Churban, to the development of the Torah after the Churban, and we found that there wasn't a sign up, there wasn't any indication, the local people had no idea that it was sitting, this is the same Yavne, yes, of Rav Yochanan ben Zakkai. They didn't know there was a disconnect between the place and the words that we read on Tisha B'Av, the words that we read in the Gemara. The people there were disconnected from their own heritage. Now sometimes we get lost. If you come from the Beis Medrash, that your focus is inside the Sefer, and that's the Yesod. The Psukim, the Mishnayos, the Gemara are what inform our identity as Bnei Yisrael and help us to build a unique and distinctive vision for what the world and Bnei Yisrael are capable of achieving. There's a goal in mind, and the goal is to build a better person and a better world, and this has been a uniquely Jewish vision for thousands of years. That vision survives to this day because of Yavne. So for us to find Yavne in a state where there were broken beer bottles and whiskey bottles and garbage covering the site, to find it in such a state was a shock to us. We went on a little bit of an investigation that day, and we walked across a mound that we later were able to determine scientifically that this was in fact ancient Yavne. It was the largest unexcavated ancient mound in the coastal plain of Israel that had never been excavated. Why hadn't it been excavated? Yavne resonates to anybody who's coming from the Beis Medrash. It resonates because Yavne is the key name in Jewish education and continuity. And so we initiated, we raised a little bit of money, we initiated a surface survey. A surface survey means that we get a line of people, volunteers, they each have a plastic bag, and they walked across the site. It took about an hour and a half. Everybody's picking up every piece of pottery, every jug handle, every artifact that's just lying strewn across the site. Now when you walk across ancient Yavne, you can look down into shafts that have fallen away from the site, and you're seeing underneath the ground pieces of walls, pieces of arches that are under the ground that have never been excavated. 4,000 years of history lying underneath your feet, and no one's ever bothered to take a deeper look. We are trained from our earliest ages to look deeper. We don't satisfy ourselves with just what the pasuk says We want to know what the Mefarshim say. We want to know what the Balei HaKabbalah say. We want to know the deeper picture. And so for us, it's always a challenge to say, what more can we find that will help us to understand the depth, the richness of what it means to be a part of Am Yisrael. I'm going to pass around a number of artifacts from Yavna. Explain that what it is. What that is.
This is a cooking pot. You can see the edge. It would have been a big cooking pot. This is 3,000 years old. This is from Yavna, from the time of Tanach. He's passing it out this way.
How do you know it's a cooking pot?
It's like, for the Sunday morning with the clock ticking, it's like asking an American, how do you know that's a baseball?
Welcome back. We are here on Taped with Rabbi Doug, and I am here with Rabbi Barnea, Selavan, and I am here with David Willner, and they are here talking to us about the program that they are presenting today. The two of you are just amazing. Now, tell me, how does a person who is a tour guide and a teacher and someone who is a teacher become archaeologists at the same time and get this passion for teaching the Bible, the Tanach, in such a way that it matches the archaeology of Israel, so people actually see the places and the people in the Torah come alive through archaeology from those events. How did this all come about? And the Foundation Stone program that the two of you are presenting.
The Mishnah says, "B'makom she'ein ish yishtadel liot ish." In the place where no one's acting, responding to a particular need, respond to that need. We saw that the country of Israel, the land of Israel, was not doing what we felt to be an effective job in communicating her stories, the richness of Jewish heritage, and we decided that we were going to act. And after a lot of research and a lot of investigation, we decided to make Yavna a model of what could be done, both in terms of the archaeology and in terms of tourism and education for the general public.
It has such a great message, Yavna. It means the continuity through Jewish learning, despite the destruction of the temple, reformatting people. Avner Goren, the senior archaeologist, says there's nothing to compare to Yavna. A people never had their temple, their religious center, their administration, their country taken away from them and survive. We did that because of Yavna. And Yavna is overgrown with weeds and garbage and worse, and it's just totally neglect. So if you can make that a touchstone of, here we are, and involve the city of Yavna and develop it and bring in birthright groups and student groups and teachers, visitors, that can work. And nobody had touched it. We organized the first excavation of it, working with different archaeologists. We continue to work with the University of Hartford, and we hope that it will grow. In the meantime, that has spawned many other projects, and bringing that into the classrooms and to help the teachers here in North America. I
think that Yavna is a great story. I myself have stayed on Kibbutz Yavna for a long time when I lived in Israel and visited there. And it's outside, I know, of the actual city of Yavna. But what I would love to do for our viewers who are not familiar, if you could just, one of the two of you, just give a brief story of Yavna and how the Jews ended up in Yavna and how that all happened, please.
The Talmud talks about the 10 exiles of the great Sanhedrin. And so we were in Jerusalem, and things got bad, and the society went out of control, and the great Sanhedrin can only institute the death penalty, can only give the death penalty if they're sitting in the temple. They deliberately moved out of the temple. When we come to the moment of the destruction of the second temple, just beforehand, the Talmud tells us that Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai managed to extract from Vespasian permission for the great academy and for the great court to operate in Yavna. Maimonides describes how the great court, the Sanhedrin, is the embodiment of the oral law. You have the written law where you can't change one letter, you're missing a fraction, a piece of ink falls off, the whole Sefer Torah is not kosher. The oral law evolves in response to the situations. And in real form, it means that this 71-member body rules and says this is the law binding on all of the Jewish people. Once we don't have that, we no longer have one central authority. That's lost. This brief moment after the destruction of the temple, before we scatter everywhere, allowed the calendar to be set, the way in which halakha and Jewish law would be set. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, in his enactments, that we follow Beit Hillel, not Beit Shammai. It was the fundamental, it's the cornerstone of modern Judaism. It's the birthplace of modern Judaism. And you'll notice how frequently Yavna is the name of a Jewish school. From Mexico City to Istanbul to Elizabeth to Paris, the new school in London they call Yavna. It means continuity through Jewish education. So again, it's the model. The whole country needs a voice. Our pet project that we worked on for 15 years is Yavne.
Wonderful. How did the two of you meet?
We were in the same yeshiva many years ago in California, and we studied together, and we built a friendship at those times, and we both independently wound up in Israel, and along similar but parallel paths, and based on that, we decided to go ahead and do this work.
I gave a tour, and what happened in that tour was so dramatic, I called David. He was the first person I thought of. David had been thinking of, there's a lot of talented people walking around Jerusalem that need a focus to be able to express it, and we tentatively gave the name foundation stone to that idea of identity through the land.
Evan Shasia.
A foundation through the land. It was a tour from Atlanta of people who go to Reform synagogues, conservative synagogues, and Orthodox synagogues, and to make a long story short, in Tzipori, where we're standing there in the museum, which had a set of the Mishnah there, Liz Lee of Alpharetta, Georgia, says, Rabbi, what is this book? What is its relevance for our time, and why haven't I heard about it in my temple? It's like saying George Washington slept here. Who was George Washington? Why don't I know about this story? I'm expected to know. And that led to a discussion of Jewish tradition, Jewish understandings. And I came back, I told David, listen to that question. And then the Jerusalem Post offered a tour in the path of the exile of the Sanhedrin. But I didn't do Yavne. We come to Yavne, we find overgrown. How can this be? And everything started from there.
And the excavation of Yavne brought out changes in our beliefs in Jewish history, isn't that right? And our knowledge of Jewish history.
It was radio news on the 5 o'clock news in Israel. First temple period pottery has been found in ancient Yavne. Now the truth is there's very little that we dug up that you can point to, because the first season the archaeologists wanted to work on the Crusader fortress that the King of Spain, King Juan Carlos of Spain, it's his family's fortress. Yes. But we found pottery, Canaanite, Philistine, First Temple, Second Temple period pottery, stoneware, which may be an indication of Jewish ritual use. And the University of Hartford organized a team of geophysicists, which have come several times. We're seeing walls and structures deep underground that now we can know, dig here, and you will find.
Now you have a piece of pottery right over here, am I correct?
Yes.
Could you get that for us? Tell me about pottery like this. Tell me what kind of pottery is this, first of all?
This is a cooking pot. And this morning they asked me, how do you know it's a cooking pot? I said, it's like asking an American, how do you know it's a baseball? But there's so many pieces that have been found, they can tell you the circumference and what it was used for. And this is from the time of the first temple dug up in Yavne.
So about how many years old?
3,000 years old.
3,000 years old.
Maybe it's only 2,800. Maybe.
Unbelievable, just unbelievable.
You're holding it in your hands.
And it really is. It's holding Israel's history in your hands is what it's doing.
That's right.
And just one of the other things that we're going to see in your presentation are coins. I want to first hold this coin up front and back. I'm not sure which is the front and the back. I believe this is the front. And this is the back. And you want to tell me about the front of this coin that I just showed, and tell me what period it's from and everything.
This is a lulav and an etrog. This is the citron.
I think I showed that as the
branch.
back. Okay, this is the first side that's showing now. Yes.
Okay, and this is what Shimon Bar Kokhba was believed in and fought for, to restore the practice of the commandments of God and ultimately of the temple, which is shown over
62
here.
years after the destruction of the temple, of the second temple, there was a revolt against Rome. And Rabbi Akiva believed that this man who minted this coin was going to be the Messiah and restore the Jewish people to the land of Israel with all of the trappings involved.
So this is about the year 130?
132 to 135 is what's given as the general years.
Wow, and this back is a picture of what the Beis Hamikdash, the Holy Temple in Jerusalem, should look like, and this was minted at the time of Bar Kokhba.
Right, now
Unbelievable.
it's a piece of art. It may not be exactly, but that's what it's meant to represent. There's an interesting feature.
And it's pure silver?
It's pure silver. It's probably stamped over a Roman coin. There's an interesting feature here that seems to be that there's one willow branch and one myrtle branch. We use 3 myrtles and 2 willows, but Rabbi Akiva's opinion is 1 and 1, and Bar Kokhba was a follower of Rabbi Akiva. Perhaps that's what's expressed. There's some
Rabbi
coin
Akiva
scholars.
was a follower of Bar Kokhba.
And Rabbi Akiva was a follower of Bar Kokhba. This was the last moment where we had someone saying, this is the land of Israel, we are the people of Israel, and we are going to serve the God of Israel. When the city of Beitar, which was his stronghold, was destroyed, we mourn that as we do the 9th of Av. And on the 15th of Av, when the bodies of those people were allowed to be buried, that Hadrian had killed and left out for many years, the rabbis instituted the blessing of Hatova Meitiv, We make that blessing, that's the fourth blessing of the grace after meals. We make that blessing in the better wine. We make that blessing in good news.
We don't say Tachnun on that day.
And we don't say Tachnun, but we know that through the destruction and learning from the destruction, we are building the future.
Beautiful. And about this other coin you have here.
Next, we are talking in a week where I'm going to say it's this coming Shabbat. The Jewish people will take out this coin we may not let anybody touch.
Let me hold it up to the camera, if I could.
Everyone is going to take out a second Torah scroll and read about the commandment of giving the half shekel in the temple to share. A rich person could not give more, and a poor person had to raise the money. This is a few days of labor put together in order to have a share in the offerings of the temple for that year. So this is a machzita shekel. This is a half shekel from the time of the second temple.
And whose picture is on it?
That is Melkart, the god of Tyre.
Oh.
It's not a Jewish coin, but what happened is that the rabbi said, you can trust the Tyrian mint not to debase their metals.
Because it's pure silver.
It's pure silver, and this was part of their economy, is to provide the currency. You know Chicago runs on Dunkin'? So the civilization ran on Tyrian silver. I could rely on this currency, and the rabbi said, you can fulfill your commandment by giving this half shekel. This is what we, in the second temple, Machatzita shekel, perhaps the most famous Jewish coin. You have to see rabbis with white beards, Doug, just tremble holding this coin, and the excitement of the children today is unbelievable.
Very nice, very nice. Well, I want to thank you both for being here with us. I wish you much success in your endeavors to teach the world how to teach about Eretz Yisrael and bring the Bible, bring the Tanach alive for them as you have done. It is just amazing. Once again, Barnea, Selavan, and David Willner, thank you for being with us here on Taped with Rabbi Doug. Stay with us. David and Barnea are going to tell us so much about Eretz Yisrael and about its antiquities and the history and the archaeology.
And we went out to this site, which is right behind Ramat Beit Shemesh, and we were amazed. We were amazed. It's not on any tourist map yet. It doesn't have any kind of building or infrastructure that would allow for tourism there. But it's a site that knocked our socks off. Not because of what we found, that was the cherry on top, but because of what it is. What we found was a city or a walled fortress overlooking the entire story of David and Goliath, David and Goliath, right? With the entire context of the story from Sefer Shmuel there in front of you. To us, we said, how can you not work in a place that has a whole story from Tanakh right there in front of you, this close to Yerushalayim, this close to my town of Efrat? We're now going to start talking about another place. And this place is called Khirbet Kayafa in Arabic, which means the beautiful ruin. Khirbet Kayafa was sitting there under everybody's nose. Nobody paid attention to it. The local Arabs had a name for it. If you asked them why it was significant, they couldn't tell you, but they were still grazing their sheep, as were Bedouin. And the local Bedouin called the place Khirbet Daoud, which means the ruin of David. Why is it called the ruin of David? They didn't know. The local kibbutznikim who are sitting in the valley growing today with their almond trees and their fields, the local kibbutznikim called Bustan Hasten Ha'avud, which means the garden of the lost Sten gun. The Sten gun was during the Milchemet HaShichur, the War of Independence, an early machine gun. They had a kibbutz there, but as we often do when you go on a tiul in Israel, you have to have a melaveh neshek, you have to have someone who's armed in case of any emergencies. And in 1949, after this kumzit, someone forgot their Sten gun there at the site. They said, when you're digging, if you find it, please return it to us. But nobody knew the name of this place. Nobody knew why it was important. All we knew was that you have a walled city from the 10th century before the Common Era. That's 3,000 years ago. And how we know how to date it, we'll let Barnea explain that part of the story. But I have here two pieces. And these pieces are 3,000 years old. they're junk. Okay, when I say they're junk to all of the academics sitting in the universities, they're junk to the Israel Antiquities Authority, they're junk to everybody except to the world of chinuch. Because what these are to the world of chinuch are pieces that you can touch that connect us directly to a time that's so far in our history that you can only deal with it in terms of your imagination. They help us to concretize, to make real a period of history that you either accept it as an act of emunah that it happened, right? Or, if you're a good scientist in the university, you say nothing's true until you prove it 100% absolutely scientifically that it's true. And so there's a debate, we'll talk about that in a minute. So you can pass this piece around, right? We named the place the Eilat Fortress, which is what, if you read in the New York Times and other periodicals, is what is caught on as the popular name, because we didn't know at the time that we got started what it would be called, and we were pretty sure that people would not remember the name Khirbet Kayafa, or know how to spell it. So, if you take a look at this piece of pottery, this is a pottery shard from the side of a large jug, and we found one that's almost twice as big, and when it was found by a 17-year-old volunteer from Beit Shemesh. He took a look at it, and he did what he was supposed to do. He put it in the bucket next to him, because all of those buckets at the end of the day go back for pottery washing to the base where the excavation is run from. Now, when he pulled it out of the ground, it was such a large and, I would say, remarkable piece, even though nobody saw any writing on it, that Barnea noticed it and the archaeologists noticed it, and it stuck in their minds. But when it went for pottery washing, the student who was cleaning it was shocked when someone yelled out, "Stop! Don't wash it anymore." A Korean volunteer student, doctoral student, who was doing his PhD on pottery at Hebrew University, he noticed that there was writing on it. Now, a piece of pottery that has writing on it is called an ostrakhan. Right? We know certain things that are written on this piece of pottery. We have the letter Shin Pei Tet, which is the word Shofet or Shafat, and it was found near the gate of the city. Now, who sat in the gates of the city?
When people were on the road, if they had an argument, so they won't need to go into the city, they just go.
Very, very good. It's almost exactly right. The gates of the city, an ancient city, are the place of commerce. They're the place of business. They're the place of trade. I'm not going to allow all the neighboring towns, whether they're Kanani or Plishti, or even from other Shvatim in Bnei Yisrael, to come into the city. I'm not going to allow them to penetrate deep into the city. They shouldn't know how our city works and what's in there. We're going to keep them in the gate area, so that in a time of war we can shut the gates and push everybody away, and we can defend ourselves, because the gate is the weakest part of the city.
Hope you enjoyed today's show. Stay with us next time for part 2 with Rabbi Barnea, Selavan, and David Willner as they share more with us about Israel's antiquities and the Tanach and the land of Israel. Hope to see you next time. Remember, you can catch our website at www.tvrabbi.com, where you can also see our shows on the web. And if you want to email us, info@tvrabbi.com is the email address. Hope to see you next time for part 2 on Taped with Rabbi Doug, along with Barnea, Selavan, and David Willner. Shalom, everyone.
And I'm talking about Rabbi Doug. Talking about Rabbi Doug. Talking about Rabbi Doug on your TV show.